Have you ever wondered what truly happens when a woman steps away from desire, from sex, from the endless chase of affection? Society often tells us that her silence is emptiness, her withdrawal is loss, but Carl Jung's psychology reveals another truth. When the body goes quiet, the soul begins to speak, and what it speaks is not weakness, but power. Today, we'll explore the hidden transformation that abstinence can awaken, the journey from silence to sacred power, and finally, to a whole and untouchable self. We live in a world that often tells women their worth is measured by their body, by desire, by how much attention they receive. When the body grows quiet, when passion fades, or when a woman chooses silence, society interprets it as a loss. People say it means failure, emptiness, or something is wrong. But Carl Jung and many spiritual thinkers would say the opposite is true. Silence is not the absence of life, it is the beginning of something deeper. The body may grow quiet, but the soul begins to whisper. And what it whispers is not about loss, but about presence, expansion, and awakening. In youth, our energy is pulled outward, toward love, validation, and recognition. But when the body rests, the energy turns inward. Suddenly, there is space to feel, to reflect, and to hear the truth within. This shift is not weakness. It is transformation. For many women, this silence becomes a sacred space. It is here that intuition grows stronger, dreams become more vivid, and self-awareness deepens. What the world calls emptiness is, in fact, a doorway. A doorway to knowing yourself beyond roles, beyond expectations, beyond the need to be chosen. Silence is not the end. It is the soul's first whisper of a new beginning. When a woman chooses abstinence, or when life places her in it, society often looks at her with pity. People assume she is lonely, unwanted, or deprived. We are taught to believe that without desire, without affection, something must be missing. But this is a misunderstanding. Abstinence is not always about lack. Very often, it becomes a path of transformation. When a woman steps away from desire or superficial attention, she is not becoming empty, she is creating space. Space for her energy to shift, to rise, and to take on a new form. Carl Jung believed that energy never disappears. It only transforms. The energy that once sought affection or validation does not die when abstinence begins. Instead, it turns inward. It fuels reflection, creativity, and self-discovery. What looks like silence on the outside is often the beginning of deep awakening on the inside. Many women who go through this experience report surprising changes. Their intuition grows sharper. Their inner clarity becomes stronger. They see their own worth more clearly, no longer defined by who touches them or who desires them. What was once a need becomes a choice. Abstinence, then, is not a punishment. It is not emptiness. It is energy being purified, transformed, and directed toward a higher awareness. In this silence, the soul finds room to speak, and when it speaks, it tells truths that desire alone could never reveal. What the world sees as lack may actually be the soul's way of leading a woman closer to her authentic self. Carl Jung believed that nothing inside us ever truly disappears. Every thought, every desire, every emotion leaves an imprint. When energy is pushed down, ignored, or repressed, it does not vanish, it waits. And when the moment is right, it reappears in new, often surprising ways. This is why Jung said repressed energy always seeks expression. If it is not lived out in one form, it will emerge in another. Sometimes it shows up in dreams, in creativity, in intuition. Other times, it comes through sudden insights or a new sense of awareness. When a woman steps back from physical desire, whether by choice or circumstance, something shifts inside her. The energy that once flowed outward no longer has its usual outlet. But it does not die. Instead, it gathers, deepens, and begins to move inward. Without the noise of constant stimulation or the pull of immediate pleasure, the soul gains room to breathe. In that space, the quiet voice of the unconscious becomes clearer. What was hidden starts to rise. Forgotten feelings, neglected parts of the self, and even buried wisdom begin to surface. The silence of the body creates a channel for the soul. Jung would say this is not repression in the negative sense. It is transformation. Energy that was once tied to instinct or desire is now freed to serve higher purposes, creativity, spirituality, and self-realization. So when pleasure fades or pauses, it does not mean loss. It means the soul finally has space to speak, and what it reveals can change everything. For many women, abstinence is not the end of desire, it is the beginning of a new kind of awareness. At first, it may feel like silence, like something has gone missing. But as the days and months unfold, something deeper begins to stir. Women often describe vivid dreams that feel more alive than ordinary life. They speak of heightened intuition, of suddenly knowing things without needing proof. Some notice that their inner clarity becomes sharper, as if a fog has lifted and they can finally see themselves without distortion. Carl Jung would say this is no accident. When energy is not spent outwardly, it does not disappear. It flows inward, nourishing the unconscious, awakening the hidden layers of the self. What seems like emptiness on the surface is actually a powerful turning point within. This inner shift is often the doorway to spiritual awakening. The absence of constant distraction allows the soul to rise. Feelings long buried may come forward, not to overwhelm, but to guide. Insights may appear suddenly, like gentle whispers from within. Abstinence, then, is not just about withholding, it is about listening. It is about creating space for the sacred voice inside to be heard. And when it is heard, it speaks of freedom, truth, and a deeper connection to life itself. So what looks like absence is not loss. It is a calling. A calling from the soul, asking you to turn inward, awaken, and discover who you truly are beyond desire. When the outer world grows quiet and the body is no longer chasing touch or desire, something powerful happens, energy turns inward. What once reached outward for affection or validation now begins to flow back into the self. And in that turning, women come face to face with hidden parts of who they are. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the side of us we do not usually see. It carries the feelings we've suppressed, the truths we've denied, and the longings we've been taught to ignore. For many women, abstinence becomes the doorway to this encounter. With fewer distractions, the unconscious rises. The shadow steps forward. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Old wounds, memories, or unmet needs may surface. But this is not punishment. It is invitation. The shadow is not an enemy to be feared, it is a mirror, showing us the parts of ourselves still waiting to be accepted. In this silence, a shift begins. Instead of constantly hoping to be chosen by someone else, women learn to choose themselves. To stand in their own presence. To honor their inner voice. This turning inward is not about isolation, it is about integration. Meeting the shadow allows women to reclaim lost energy, lost power, and lost pieces of themselves. The absence of external touch, then, is not emptiness, it is the soul's way of guiding us home. Home to authenticity. Home to wholeness. Home to the self that has always been waiting. Silence is often misunderstood. Many see it as emptiness, as absence, as a void to be filled. But in truth, silence can be sacred. When the body grows quiet, when desire pauses, when longing softens, it does not mean life has disappeared. It means space has been created. This space is like a temple. It is not empty, it is alive, waiting, holy. Within it, something ancient begins to stir. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes, those deep patterns of the human soul. And in silence, one of the most powerful archetypes awakens, the wild woman. She is not wild in the sense of chaos, but wild in the sense of freedom. She is instinctual, untamed, wise. She does not live for the approval of others. She trusts her own rhythm, her own nature, her own truth. When external noise falls away, women can finally hear her voice. It whispers strength, independence, and the courage to walk in authenticity. She teaches that solitude is not loneliness, but power. That stillness is not weakness, but wisdom. In the silence of the body, the soul opens its doors. And in that sacred space, the wild woman steps forward, not to be hidden, not to be silenced, but to guide. So silence is not something to fear. It is a sanctuary. It is where the deepest parts of the self awaken, calling us to live fully, freely, and in truth. In every culture, women are often told that their value lies in how much they are desired. Youth, beauty, charm, these are praised, while silence, distance, and self-possession are questioned. But what happens when a woman no longer plays this game? When she steps back from the constant performance of attraction? Such a woman is often seen as mysterious, unpredictable, even dangerous. She no longer chases approval. She no longer begs to be chosen. Instead, she chooses herself. And in that choice, society grows uneasy. Why? Because a woman who does not depend on being desired cannot be controlled by the usual illusions. Compliments do not bind her. Rejection does not break her. She sees through the surface and refuses to live as a reflection of someone else's needs. Carl Jung might say that she has shifted her energy inward, toward her own soul. In this state, she becomes untouchable, not because she is closed, but because she is whole. She no longer fears solitude. She no longer mistakes chaos for love. This makes her powerful. And power in the hands of a woman who is no longer begging for affection unsettles a world built on dependency. Society fears her not because she is empty, but because she is full of clarity, independence, and inner truth. She exposes the illusions of romance, status, and approval by standing outside of them. She reminds others of the freedom they, too, could claim, if they dared. The withdrawn woman is not weak. She is not lonely. She is awake. And in her awakening, she holds a mirror to the world, showing it the illusions it would rather not see. When a woman begins to withdraw from the outer world, it is rarely easy. At first, it can feel like punishment, like loneliness pressing in, or invisibility wrapping around her. She may wonder if she has disappeared, if stepping back means she no longer matters. But this is not the truth. It is simply the beginning of the shadow phase. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole. Yet before wholeness arrives, the shadow must be faced. In this stage, old patterns rise again. Memories of being overlooked, of rejection, of longing for love may come flooding back. The mind tempts her, return to what is familiar, chase desire again, seek the comfort of attention. These temptations are not signs of failure. They are signs of progress. The ego resists because it feels itself losing power. It clings to what once defined identity, beauty, affection, validation. But the soul asks for something deeper. The shadow phase is the bridge between the old self and the truer self. It is where a woman learns to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. To watch the pull of old wounds without obeying them. To see that loneliness is not emptiness but the space where new strength is born. It is a test, yes, but also a transformation. In enduring this struggle, she begins to see the truth. Her worth was never dependent on being seen by others. It was always within her, waiting. The shadow phase is not the end of the journey. It is the necessary fire that burns away illusions so the soul can finally take its rightful place. When fear rises, many women feel the urge to go back. Back to old relationships, old habits, even old wounds. The familiar, no matter how painful, can feel safer than the unknown. This is why so many cycles repeat. It is not weakness, it is fear disguised as comfort. But there comes a moment when awareness awakens. The woman who notices the pattern, the same arguments, the same heartbreak, the same emptiness, begins to see clearly. And in that clarity, she holds the power to choose differently. Breaking the cycle does not happen through anger or force. It happens through awareness. By watching her own impulses, by seeing the fear that pushes her back, she learns to pause. To breathe. To ask, is this love, or is this my wound pulling me again? This stage is not easy. It can feel like anguish, like being torn between the past and the possibility of something new. Yet this tension is not the end. It is the cocoon, the in-between place where transformation quietly takes root. In staying with herself, even through discomfort, the woman begins to grow. Slowly, the old cycles lose their grip. What once felt like fate reveals itself as a choice. And in that awareness, she begins to step toward freedom. With time, something begins to shift. What once felt like emptiness slowly becomes space. What once felt like abandonment becomes solitude. In this quiet, she starts to see herself more clearly. She realizes that her worth is not tied to being desired, chosen, or validated by others. Her true value lies in her own presence, being fully with herself, listening to her inner voice, honoring her soul. The energy she once poured outward in search of approval now returns inward, becoming strength. This is the moment of integration. The scattered parts of her, the longing, the wounds, the shadows, begin to come together. She understands that she is not broken, she was only searching outside for what was always within. And so she no longer waits for someone to rescue her. She rescues herself. She becomes her own anchor, her own protector, her own safe home. What once was desperate need transforms into conscious choice. She can love, but she does not need love to feel whole. She can give, but she does not give to be completed. The pain she carried becomes wisdom, and the longing becomes depth. Integration is not the end of her journey, but a new beginning, one rooted in freedom, authenticity, and self-trust. After walking through silence, shadow, and self-discovery, the woman emerges changed. She is no longer driven by the old hunger to be desired at any cost. She no longer bends herself to fit into someone else's story. The transformed woman no longer accepts partial love, half-hearted promises, or shallow validation. She knows her worth is not measured by how others see her, but by how deeply she honors herself. In this awareness, she radiates a new kind of presence, quiet, strong, undeniable. Her wholeness is not loud. It does not beg, chase, or cling. Instead, it glows from within, a fullness that others can sense even before she speaks. This radiance is the gift of authenticity, living aligned with her soul rather than her fears. When love comes, it is different than before. It is not to complete her, to fill a void, or to rescue her. Love now arrives as a companion, a mirror, a fellow traveler. She chooses it freely, not out of need, but from a place of abundance. This is the emergence of a whole woman, radiant, authentic, and free. Not waiting to be chosen, she has already chosen herself. Abstinence is often misunderstood. Many see it only as deprivation, as something missing, as a life half-lived. But in truth, when chosen or entered consciously, abstinence becomes something far deeper. It transforms from a state of lack into a ritual of protection and renewal. In this space, the body's silence is not emptiness. It becomes the soul's language, a way of speaking without words. The absence of physical desire is not a closing, but an opening to intuition, to clarity, to unseen strength. What once felt like loneliness can turn into a sacred ground of becoming. She begins to realize that this period is not about punishment or waiting, but about transformation. The energy once tied to longing or old patterns begins to rise within her, reshaping itself into vision and power. She rises from this silence not to return to old roles, not to once again beg for love or validation. Instead, she rises to live as her truest self, independent, wise, and unshaken. Abstinence, in this light, is not a loss but a gateway. It clears the noise, breaks the illusions, and allows the soul to fully awaken. From abstinence comes sacred power, and from sacred power comes freedom. The journey of abstinence, silence, and self-reflection is often mistaken for isolation. From the outside, it may look like withdrawal, as if the woman has stepped away from life. But in truth, this path is not about stepping out, it is about stepping in. It is not isolation, but immersion into her own depths, her own truth, her own soul. A woman who learns to hear the soul's whisper becomes untouchable. Not untouchable because she has built walls, but because she no longer bends to illusions. She cannot be manipulated by shallow affection, nor swayed by empty promises. Her strength is quiet but immovable. She sees with clarity, and that clarity protects her. In the silence of her body, she discovers something the world often hides: abundance, power, and wholeness. What once felt like lack now reveals itself as overflowing presence. What once seemed like emptiness now becomes sacred fullness. The final awakening is not about returning to the woman she once was, nor about conforming to society's demands. It is about emerging whole, radiant, and free. She walks in her truth, guided not by fear or longing, but by the steady voice of her soul. This is her liberation. This is her power. This is the final awakening. This is the truth behind abstinence, not emptiness, but awakening. If Jung taught us anything, it's that silence is not the end, but the beginning of the soul's voice. If this journey spoke to you, share this video with someone who needs it, leave a comment about your own experiences, and subscribe for more explorations into Carl Jung, psychology, and the soul. Because sometimes, silence isn't loneliness. It's power.